Hey guys, back again. So let's talk about a whole lot of stuff that I haven't been reviewing. I've been doing these reviews way not doing singular reviews. I've been like building them up because I've been busy. So let's get started with all the movies and shows that I've been watching, or at least ones that I think are important to talk about right now. So the first movie I'm going to talk about, because it came out I think last week, was Immaculate, which stars Sydney Sweeney, of Euphoria fame and Madam Web fame. Uh, Everybody saw Madam Web, and she joked about it on SNL. So Immaculate is about a nun who goes to an all-girls school, and there's something weird and sinister going along the lines as the movie progresses. And I'm going to say this. I think this is a neon movie. This one was really, really good, and I couldn't believe that it was really, really interesting. I thought the fact that this movie started out really good on a slow burn kind of level, where this character was kind of growing into this situation, and then you see the sinister nature behind it. I thought was really well done and really cool. And people joke about Sydney Sweeney, and I just started watching Euphoria, and I'm liking her in that. And I did see Madam Web, of course, with her in that as well. But in terms of like acting, I thought she did fantastic in this, and I didn't think she was bad in Madam Web or Euphoria. But people kind of make her kind of as a joke because she's got big boobs, I guess. Like a lot of people just joke about her online, and I think in terms of a person, she's a good actress. I like her. I thought she was really, really good in this, and I thought that she really carried this movie. She really was genuinely just an interesting character, and I dug that. Um, the big thing I gotta say is that the last act of this movie is really fantastic, and that's one of the reasons why I genuinely thought this was great, is because that last act, even though the rest of the movie is good build up and effective, but man, that ending though was fucking awesome. I loved it. I love that final thing, and I'm not going to say what it is if you haven't seen it, but if you've seen it and you're in this group of people who know what happened, I bet people probably think the same way I did. I really like that. So I really thought Immaculate was great. It's definitely one of those movies that I'm going to remember, and I'm definitely going to buy. Um, and then I guess next I'm going to talk about the first Omen, which is another possession demon kind of movie. Or not, well, nun thing. It's like there's like all this demon nun horror right now, and I think that's really cool. So the first Omen is, of course, the prequel to the original 1976 The Omen. The Omen franchise, The Omen has had a good amount of sequels. There's four main Omen movies plus the remake, and then this movie. So The Omen is not shy of being a franchise, and I do like the first Omen's great. The second one I like a lot. The third one I like a little less, but I still like. The fourth one's not that good. And the remake I thought was okay, but it was just kind of like following the same beats as the original, but just modernized, like most remakes are, that are not that great. It was okay, the remake of The Omen. But this one, the first Omen, like I said, is a prequel, and it stars a woman named Maggie. I don't know what the actress's name is. I'm blanking on it, but she's excellent in the movie. But this character, Maggie, who is a nun who comes and finds out that there is a conspiracy related to, well, we know it's going to be to create the Antichrist to be set on Earth, to have him be born, Damien. But she doesn't know that, and she goes through this movie suffering and finding all this weird body horror stuff, and I think that's really cool. I don't really want to spoil it, but man, I want to say a moment of this movie that I thought was great. I guess I'll say it. It's not like a giant spoiler. It's just something that you're like, oh, gross. But there's some body horror in this, and I really dug it. There was a scene where the main character, Maggie, or Margaret, sees a woman being birthed, and then you see a close-up shot of this demon hand coming out of the woman's vagina, and I thought that was so awesome and just so cool to see. This movie, and I'm not going to say anything else about the movie besides that in terms of elements that happen, but this movie is a body horror movie, and I really thought that was a good surprise and a good distinction. between the other Omen movies, even though the other Omen movies do have stuff where like people get killed, but this one had a couple different, specifically body moments of horror, and I thought that was cool. Um, I really like this one. I thought that this, honestly, in terms of prequels, like I just couldn't believe how good this was. Even though I do love a lot of prequels for stuff, this one just genuinely surprised me in terms of how it so carefully etched itself into the Omen mythology and franchise. I thought that was great. Really liked the first Omen as well. I think I liked Immaculate slightly more, but the first Omen I think is really good as well. And then the other theatrical movie I watched recently was Godzilla x Kong New Dynasty, which is of course a sequel to the other four MonsterVerse, Warner Brothers, Godzilla, King Kong movies. This one is hard to say because I'm a casual fan of these movies. I love the original King Kong and the King Kong franchise, even though some of them are pretty bad. I've watched them more than the Godzilla ones. I really haven't seen anything besides the American ones, and I'm ashamed to say that. And I want to watch the other ones, but I just that's been on my radar. It's just I haven't pursued that yet. So I'm really into King Kong, but Godzilla so far I'm not really into, but that's because I have not really delved into that universe. In terms of, I've seen the American ones, but not the Japanese films, and I hear they're excellent, or good, or fun, or dumb, all over the place. But I still want to see them, the Godzilla Japanese films, Toho films. But this one to me is just totally okay. Godzilla x Kong New Dynasty. It is about Godzilla and Kong joining together to fight a different beast. While you've also got the characters, Rebecca Hall's character back. You've got the dude from, what's the dude from the Child's Play remake? I forget what his name is. The guy who was Mike Norris in the Child's Play remake. He is back again. I'll think of his name. Oh, Brian Tyree Henry, I think. Is that it? I think that's his name. But he's great in everything I've seen him in. I do like him a lot. But he's in this, as well as Dan Stevens, who I think Dan Stevens was the star of the show in terms of like the most memorable human character. Because with these movies for the Godzilla, King Kong, like American movies, like this MonsterVerse, like all these characters I usually don't give a shit about. Like I just think they're so utterly one note. And Kong Skull Island I really liked, and I thought that's my favorite out of the MonsterVerse movies. And that one I thought, even though some of those characters kind of fell flat or uninteresting for me, that was the one where they were the most interesting. And this one had Dan Stevens, who I thought did a good job, and I thought he was the most interesting with the most personality. Because these actors in these movies, and I'm assuming all the Godzilla movies in the Toho ones are like this too, where all the human characters are just cannon fodder, or they're just characters that are there to narrate the fight between Godzilla and King Kong or whatever, in those movies as well. So I think that it's hard for me to say that because I'm kind of a hypocrite, because I love horror movies where like you've got generic ass characters who are just there to be killed, blah blah blah. But in these MonsterVerse movies, like the Godzilla 2014, Godzilla King of Monsters, Godzilla vs. Kong, and this one, the characters mostly are just not very memorable at all for me. Like, I feel like these actors are good actors, but they just don't have, like, I don't know if they're told to talk like that, or if they're just like that as these characters. But they're the most uninteresting part. But this one I felt like was a little more interesting than the last couple of MonsterVerse ones. Like Godzilla King of the Monsters was the one where I was like utterly bored on all these human characters and I couldn't stand them in that movie. And maybe I might think differently if I watch it again, but man, I did not care for them at all. That was the one where I felt the least interested in it. And the 2014 Godzilla was like that too, with Aaron Taylor Johnson and Elizabeth Olsen. That was pretty uninteresting as well, but I think Godzilla King of the Monsters was the one where I did not care the most about any of these characters. But this one visually was cool. It definitely had some great shots, but it's nothing compared to this next movie that I'm going to talk about that I also saw in the theater, which is Dune 2. Dune Part 2. So Dune, I watched the first Dune. I watched the 80s one, of course, with Colin McLaughlin a long time ago. But the first Dune, the one from 2021, that Denis Villeneuve directed, I saw this year, maybe like a couple months ago, for the first time. I missed it. I think it was during COVID. I think that I just didn't go out to see it. And I just kept forgetting about it. And I finally got to watch the first Dune, which was actually really good. And I liked it more than the David Lynch, Kyle MacLachlan 80s one. The new Dune 2021, like, I felt like established a story better, where I understood it better, because I did not read the books. I do nothing about the book of Dune. And I felt like that 2021 version of it did a better job for me personally to understand what was going on. Because I felt like in the David Lynch one, it is very David Lynchy, where it's just kind of weird and surreal. And that's fine, because I love David Lynch stuff, but it just didn't really gel for me. That's probably my least favorite David Lynch movie that I've seen, honestly. Like, it's not terrible, but it's just something that I just did not get into. But the 2021 Dune, I thought, did a better job. I thought that it is visually a beautiful movie. I think Denis Villeneuve, I think I've seen all of his movies. I have loved or liked every movie that he's done. He is a really great director, and I think that his visuals especially are just incredible. And the first Dune was really good with that, and it was just a good movie and an interesting sci-fi movie. So I liked the Dune 2021. But now this one, Dune 2, Dune Part 2. This one, I felt like, I still think it's great, like the other Dune, the 2021 Dune. But this one had a couple moments where I was like, man, I needed some, like, dialogue understanding for these, like, terms of lore. Because, like I said, I felt like the 2021 Dune did a better job of establishing all this stuff that you understood through the movie's dialogue. But then in Dune 2, there were a couple moments where I was like, I don't know what that word means. Like, maybe I just dozed off and forgot, or maybe I just wasn't paying attention watching it. But I was wondering why I didn't understand a couple elements or names of lore in Dune 2. And that's a small complaint, because honestly, this one visually, again, is incredible. And I think that it really feels like this generation's Star Wars, even though it's not as popular. But it is popular, though. It's making a lot of money, Dune 2. But it really does, to me, feel like this generation's Star Wars, where you are getting a visual sci-fi movie that hopefully will stand the test of time and will keep going. And I think that it is really great, Dune 2 as well. Besides, like I said, a couple of things that I personally might just have missed in my head. Maybe I just didn't understand or hear what these terms meant for a couple of elements in the movie. And it's hard whenever you have a novel that you haven't read, and then you watch a movie that might just have something that the audience automatically assume the audience would know. And like I said, maybe I just missed it, like a brief thought of what this means. Maybe I just missed that, whatever. But Dune 2 was fantastic. Really loved Dune 2 as well. Great time at the movies. And this is mostly going to be non-horror until the end. So the next thing I watched, I guess I could talk about both of these movies that I watched on Max. Or no, Paramount Plus, I watched this one. Mean Girls 2023. So, we have Mean Girls from 2004. Or Mean Girls 2024, I guess, is what this one is. We got the original Mean Girls from 2004, which had Lindsay Lohan, Rachel McAdams, Tina Fey, Lacey Chabert, all these big actresses. Which I really like Mean Girls 2004. I think it's really fun. I think it's just a really funny movie, and it's a really fun time, and these characters are really good in it. The actresses are really good in it. I really like the first Mean Girls, as a lot of people do. So of course they were gonna make another connection to the Mean Girls. I mean, they did a Mean Girls 2, which I've never seen, which I hear is really bad. I think it has Megan Jet Martin in it from like Disney fame, but I hear that's really bad too, really bad. Um, but yeah, I only saw the original Mean Girls, and I rewatched that like this last year whenever they announced Mean Girls 2024 was going to the theater. But then I didn't see this one in the theater, and I waited until it was on Paramount Plus. And I'm glad I did, because this movie is just really, really forgettable. So there's good intentions for this movie, for the new Mean Girls. There's good intentions in the fact that they're trying to make it different. They tried to make it a musical. They tried to make it feel modernized, but man, I can't stand when, for the most part, I can't stand when remakes do line for line, like, dialogue, and it's worse. And I don't want to dog on any of these actors, because I don't want to look at myself like, oh, I think they're bad. I don't think these actors are bad. I just think that they are copying iconic moments that just fall flat. And it's really unfortunate, because I want these people to succeed who are in this movie. I want this movie to do good, but it's just one of those remakes that just does the same thing as the original, but less interesting or less good. And it's a musical, and none of the musical numbers are good or interesting. Like, I didn't like any of them. I'm not going to say this is an awful movie. It's just really, really generic and run-of-the-mill, and just, you obviously can watch the original, and that one's one I'd watch and recommend over this any time of the day. I would recommend this anytime. Also, it sounds bad that I say this, but we're in a time period where everybody's really sensitive about saying mean stuff, so having a movie Mean Girls in 2024 doesn't really work, because they're not that mean. Like, watching the 2004 one, they're actually mean and diabolical, and this one just didn't do that. It's very safe and just it doesn't want to hurt anybody's feelings kind of movie. And it's not very, it doesn't pack a punch like the original does. So yeah, Mean Girls 2024, that's a no for me, dog. But I didn't hate it. I just thought it was really utterly generic. There are a couple moments that I laughed that were okay, but there were very few and far between. And then the second movie that I watched on Max that was released in theaters that I missed was Wonka, which is the new Willy Wonka prequel. Again, another prequel. This one's starring Timothée Chalamet, who was in Dune and all these big movies. That he's been in everything recently. He is one of the most popular male actors right now. And it's funny because Dune, Zendaya and Timothée Chalamet was in Dune 1 and 2. They're both one of the most popular actors and actresses right now. Wonka, I liked Wonka. I thought this was cool. So Wonka is, of course, a prequel to I'm guessing, the original Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. And Timothée Chalamet, even though people get annoyed that he's in everything now and he's all over the place, and I get it. I get it too, but I like him as an actor. I thought that he did good in this, and I thought that he was fun and interesting, and I thought that this movie was surprising as a prequel, because you have Willy Wonka basically get trapped by these these money dealers, and they keep him and these other people in this house where they've got to pay, and they can't escape. And I thought that was funny, and Olivia Colman was the bad guy. I thought that was funny, and I haven't seen her in any British stuff. I know she's more commonly known in British TV and film, I'm assuming. And a lot of people say that she's great, and I saw her in Secret Invasion, which was that MCU TV show, which wasn't that good, but I thought that she was fun in it. So I need to watch some British stuff that she's in, because everyone's saying she's excellent in those. But in this, I really liked her a lot. I thought that she was a really fun bad guy, and she and the other guy that was with her, the husband or boyfriend or whatever, they were both really funny, and they had funny camaraderie. They felt like kind of like Dumb and Dumber kind of characters. Like, they were funny. Olivia Colman and that guy, I thought that they were really interesting. I thought this one visually was really cool. I thought that these characters were all kind of interesting. I thought it was cool seeing all these actors. You also see Keegan-Michael Key in it, and he gets really fat. And I thought that was funny, because you never see that, because he's such a skinny dude. That was such a funny joke, like, kind of joke relating to that. Like, I just thought that was funny seeing that. Um, it overall, like, it's not excellent, but it's a good movie. I liked Wonka. I thought it was entertaining, and I thought these characters were fun. Like I said, visually it's fun. It's a good family movie. I thought it was enjoyable. Then I'm going to talk about Bottoms, which is this movie that came on Amazon Prime, this indie movie that I heard a lot of fun stuff about. It has the actress, her name is Io, I forgot what her last name is, but she's on The Bear, which is an excellent show on FX. And that's the reason why I wanted to see this movie, because it had her in it, because she's great in The Bear. I really love The Bear. That's a great show. I recommend that if anybody hasn't seen it. It's about a restaurant where, like, all these chefs are just being horrible to each other, and they're just dealing with a lot of mental shit. And I think that it's really funny, but it's dark and it's good and really entertaining. The Bear, definitely recommend that. But anyways, I watched this because of the actress being in this, because I really liked her in that. And the plot of this, and this is the plot synopsis. The plot synopsis is words, not mine, but the plot of this is two ugly lesbians are trying to get laid. And I thought that was such a funny tag, like a funny synopsis that I saw everywhere whenever you looked at this movie. This one was really fun. It was a teen comedy, like, say, American Pie, but modernized. And I really thought that this one, as opposed to, say, something like the Mean Girls new one, like, this one is mean and really funny, and how mean-spirited it is. And it goes raunchy and just ridiculous, and I thought that was great. I thought that this movie went a place I didn't expect in this type of movie at the end. The ending of the movie legitimately shocked me, because in a good way, where I was like, wow, I can't believe they went there. They actually did that. Like, and I won't say what it is because I want you guys to see it. It was really funny. I thought this one was great. This was definitely a great surprise. Like, I was genuinely glad to see this one. So definitely see Bottoms if you are into that kind of teen comedy that's really raunchy. Like, it's really fun. And then let's talk about, I've got a couple more on my list. Oh, so this movie I watched like a couple months ago, and I kept forgetting to review it. So I remembered enough to talk about it. So I want to talk about Saltburn, which is the newest movie directed by Emerald Fennell, who directed Promising Young Woman, which I really liked. And she also directed something else I think I've seen. Or maybe I might be wrong. But Saltburn stars Barry Coogan. And he he goes to Oxford, and he kind of is falling for this guy, but also falling for this girl, and falling for this family of this rich, entitled family. And chaos kind of ensues, like sexual chaos ensues, where like this character and these characters all are over the top, and on purposely over the top yuppie characters, where like they all want to have sex with each other. They all do weird ass stuff to each other. They all say weird stuff to each other. Like, Rosamund Pike's in this, and she plays the mom, and Barry Coogan goes up to her and talks about what stuff he wants to do with her, like having sex with her. Or like somebody will do something like sexual in the shower, and then Barry Coogan will go and lick the shower hole. Like, stuff like that. Like, it is bizarre. And it is funny because it is so nasty. And I liked seeing that. I thought that was just so entertaining. This one has an ending too, where like the last 5 minutes, you're going to be like, what the fuck is this? Like, in a funny way. Like, it's genuinely hilarious. I really like Saltburn. That one is great. And it, like I said, Emerald Fennell, really love Promising Young Woman. I'm forgetting if she made another movie I've seen, but I really like that movie. So of course I was going to watch this because of how much I love that other one. Saltburn was great. And then let's talk about, so this came out a while back. I think this came out a year ago or 2 years ago, but I finally got to watch it on Netflix, which is Bodies, 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 starring Pete Davidson and a lot of young kids. I don't know any of the other actors' names, but Pete Davidson is one that I know actor's name of. But this one is about, there's a game that these is it Gen Z? These Gen Z people play, called Bodies, Bodies, Bodies. And then they realize it gets out of hand and people are actually dying. And then they have to try to find the killer while surviving. But this movie, like Saltburn, is funny because it makes fun of Gen Zers, like where they just say stuff that is just so over the top, like ridiculous, where it's like, where like all these kids hate each other and all these kids say stuff like, you're toxic and you're horrible and you can't make a relationship with anybody, kind of dialogue like that, where these characters are just so over the top and mean to each other. But I thought that was fun. This movie does a interesting job with that, and I think that the ending of it, I won't spoil here, but the ending of it I have seen in another horror movie, and again, I won't spoil it because I don't want people to know what it is, but whenever the big punch happened, like at the end, I was like, well, that's good, but I've seen that in another movie that I like more, another horror movie I like more. But this one, I thought performances were good. I thought that these characters were fun in terms of how unlikable they are. They were fun, and the acting was good, and the performances were good, and I thought that it was ridiculous in a way where I'm going to remember it. But it's not a movie I'm going to watch again, really. But I thought that Bodies, 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 for sure, definitely had some good things about it. It definitely had some good critical praise about it, which I was glad for. Because it does do a good satire of Gen Zers and, like, how you're just making fun of, like, how ridiculous people can be. And I don't mean now, I just mean in any time in history, people can just be ridiculous. And then let's talk about 2 Argento movies that I watched. So I watched the Argento Dracula. These are both on Shudder, by the way. The Argento Dracula, which before I watched it, everybody's like, don't watch it, it's awful. It's horrible. And then I watched it and I thought, man, this is horrible. But man, I kind of laughed at this. I thought it was entertaining. This one is utterly bad, though. It is really low budget bad, but it's got some good gore in it. And the gore I did remember. It is the Dracula story, but just basically like really bad iteration of it. Sometimes it feels like porn. Sometimes it's just really exploitive. But I mean, the gore in this, like, I really remember. I'll remember it. I think it was fun, but that's the only thing I really remember about it. But because of that, the entertainment factor of it went a little higher for me. Besides it being not a good movie, I thought that it had some moments that were entertaining about it. Even though it's not a good movie, but it's definitely one of the worst Argento movies out of all of them that I've seen. And I've seen almost all of them. I think I've got Sleepless. I think is the only one of the only ones I know I need to see, but I know there's probably 1 or 2 more. And then I also saw the Stendhal Syndrome, which is another Dario Argento movie, which has Asia Argento, his daughter, trying to find a killer through Stendhal Syndrome, where like you see these photos and like you see like images, and it's really surreal and weird. In a way, I thought that this one was a step up from like a way better step up than the recent Dario Argento movies, like Dark Glasses. I didn't like, and the Dracula one was bad, but I thought it was entertaining, but it's still bad. And there's another one that he did after this that was pretty not good too, but I can't remember. But anyways, the Stendhal Syndrome came out in the 90s, and this one, at least in terms of visuals, at least in terms of feeling more like Argento, it was better than those movies for sure, those recent Dario Argento movies, more recent ones. But it still wasn't great, but it had moments of cool effects, moments of cool use of ideas like that. Because I haven't really seen one like that, with the idea of using photos painted pictures as like cool surreal images, and I thought that was cool. I thought that was interesting. But that's really all I remember about this Stendhal Syndrome, so that might not be a good thing either. And then I got one more. Let me get a drink of water real quick. So the last one that I am going to review is a show that I've been watching, and I watch a lot of TV, but I've got to talk about Quiet on Set, which is the new kind of thing showing that all these higher ups at Nickelodeon and people at Nickelodeon are horrible human beings. And I grew up with Nickelodeon. I grew up with all that, Amanda Show, um, all these kind of shows that like they talk about. And the focus of this starts with Dan Schneider, who is the guy who is in charge of all the Nickelodeon shows. Like, I guess, is it executive producer? Is that what it's called? I don't know what it's called. That whatever that term is, that higher up. He's not like one of the business heads, but or maybe he might be, but he's like one of the higher ups in Nickelodeon that did all the stuff like with Nickelodeon, making it really popular. Dan Schneider. So this one, like I said, starts with Dan Schneider, who they tell stories about where like weird, and also I gotta say what's the word? Not documentary. This is a show that interviews people who worked for him, and looking at some of the things these people say, they sound really bad, but then there's some stuff where I'm like, it doesn't really seem like that might not be accurate. And I also watched Dan Schneider's YouTube video where he's talking about apologizing, blah, 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 after this came out, and stuff that his point of view were, whether it was true or not, or whether the things these people said are true or not. It's hard to take this with a grain of salt because you're never there for these situations. For like, if you were there as a fly on the wall and listening to these conversations that these people actually had, like, in real life, like, it'd be different, and there might be a different perspective on this documentary where, like, you never know the truth on what all these people are saying, whether it's Dan Schneider or these people that are being interviewed. But the Dan Schneider thing starts out where all these people are going up and talking about how bad he was. There's two women who worked for him, and they both had to be counted as one person when they got a split pay. And that doesn't sound legal, and they said that in the documentary, but Dan Schneider's interviews that came out this year where he apologized said that he did that with guys as well, and that's a common factor that you do, and he wasn't in charge of that, which I don't know anything business-wise how that works, but that might be true, might not be true. But they said stuff like that. Or Dan Schneider would always do weird stuff where, like, for example, the show Zoe 101 with Jamie Lynn Spears, there was a moment in the show where there's like some like blue lotion or something that one of the characters splashes on Jamie Lynn Spears' face, so it looks like, obviously, like cum, even though it's not. It's just shampoo or lotion or whatever. And then there's like a video of Ariana Grande whenever she first started on Victorious, like holding a potato and saying, "Come on, potato, give me the juice." And she's like shaking this potato, and like it's really overly sexual in a way where it looks like it's overly sexual with the things that these kids are saying and doing on these shows. And watching these scenes later as an adult, I'm like, man, I didn't realize that some of this stuff really is screwed up. But I also watched Double Toasted reviews of this, which Double Toasted is awesome. They talked about that I Love Lucy and stuff does this, like in the 40s and 50s. So it's like, well, I guess it's hard to knock it on this one if they do it on those kind of shows as well. But it's still something to mention, though, that there's a lot of weird sexual stuff. People would also say stuff like, "Oh, every woman would go and have to rub Dan Schneider's back as the job," and he said you get in trouble if you wouldn't rub his back or stuff like that. There was a behind the scenes clip where Dan Schneider was with Amanda Bynes in the hot tub on that Amanda Bynes sketch where she's in the hot tub and she like talks to famous people. Like one where it's like, oh, Leonardo da Vinci's in the hot tub with her, and they're talking about painting or whatever. Or I mean, and then she'd be like, oh, you want to play the spaghetti? And then he'd be like, yeah, Leonardo da Vinci eats spaghetti. Like, that's the skit. But there's a behind the scenes of Dan Schneider and Amanda Bynes in the hot tub together, and he's clothed, but she's wearing a swimsuit, and it's just kind of weird and not good. And I've heard that there's a conspiracy rumor that Amanda Bynes had an abortion because Dan Schneider got her pregnant or something, which I don't even know if that's true. That's not something that us publicly want to know or should know. But I've just heard that rumor as well. But also the Dan Schneider thing, it's weird because it doesn't sound great. Like, he doesn't sound like a good boss at all, or wasn't a good boss at all. But compared to the other shit in this show, like, I don't know why they put him as the main, like, I guess it's because he's the boss, but, like, the 3 pedophiles that were actually on this show, like, that wasn't the main focus until you got to those episodes, and I was like, that's way worse than just a guy asking girls for back rubs. That's not right, but it's better than a kid being sodomized, like you see later, because Drake Bell from Drake and Josh, the Amanda Show, I grew up with those shows, like I said, he came out and said that he was sodomized and he was sexually abused by Brian Peck, who was the dialogue coach on all these shows. And there's it's really sad and really hard to hear, but there's a thing where Drake's dad is also on the show. Drake's dad was the manager of Drake, and then Drake's dad and mom are divorced, and then Brian Peck slowly edged his way into Drake Bell's life, telling the mom bad stuff, so the mom eventually worked it out to where the dad of Drake's dad was not his manager anymore, and then Brian Peck became Drake's manager and then took him home and said he'd like drive him back to work, blah blah blah, and then started doing sexual stuff to Drake Bell apparently, and that's awful. That's genuinely horrible. And also this Brian Peck guy, who I guess is still alive in LA, I looked up, he's in LA. He apparently was friends with Jeffrey Dahmer, which, what the fuck, that's insane. Nope, don't like that. And that is the worst thing out of all these things. Like, I know they're talking about Dan Schneider being kind of rude and pervy, but like, man, like, this Brian Peck thing is the worst, of course, out of all this. And then there was another guy who was a pedophile because he was like a 20-year-old and he was a Christian and he acted all Christian-y, but then he took naked pictures of himself and sent to like a young girl, and like the mom knew. I think the girl's name was Brandy. I don't know if she was like a popular like star. That name sounds kind of familiar, but I might be wrong. I don't know much about this Brandy person, but it was Brandy's mom who was talking about this story, and that's fucked up too. And then apparently there was a third pedophile who they have no like talking about him. They just show a picture of Brian Peck, the Christian guy, and the other pedophile guy, and he's not even talked about. He's just in the picture, and that's it. So I know they're going to do more episodes of this show, so I wonder if they're going to show or talk about that third pedophile. But it's obviously fucked up, man. And I don't like, Dan Schneider didn't sound like a good person, but man, they really should have focused more in the marketing about these pedophiles, because that's what's the horrible thing was. If you're here to watch something bad, like, and hear about a bad story, that's the worst story than just Dan Schneider being kind of rude. And like I said, maybe I don't know more about Dan Schneider because all these other actors are keeping secrets about Dan Schneider. Maybe there was more to it. Like I said, that rumor that like he got Amanda Bynes pregnant, who knows if that's true or not, and we'll probably never know. Because Amanda Bynes right now is just trying to avoid all this stuff, and I'm kind of glad, because she probably had a horrible time with all this. And I feel bad that she lost a lot of this stuff because of these people and working for Nickelodeon. It stinks, because if you see her now, you could tell she's kind of different. That's a nice way of putting it. But I really liked Quiet on Set. Like, I like just hearing the stories. It's obviously a low budget like documentary series. Like, it's not anything like super special in terms of it's basically one of those documentaries, which is fine, but I was interested because I grew up with these shows, and now I'm seeing just how screwed up some of the stuff was. But that doesn't mean it all was bad, because there were some actors who said they did not deal with anything bad, and also I'm trying to think if there's anything else with Dan Schneider, because the Dan Schneider stuff was least interesting. Well, there was one kid who said because he was black, Dan Schneider didn't like him, but then Dan Schneider throughout his career had kind of helped out with having black kids on shows, like on kids shows and comedies, which I appreciate. But the first one on all that, I forget what his name was, he said Dan Schneider didn't really appreciate him, and he thought there was kind of tension because he was black or something like that, and I'm like, man, that's not good if that's what happened. But he also helped out a lot of black people go and create careers with their shows. And it's interesting that, like, Dan Schneider so far, all the stuff that they said about him is just, it just sounds kind of like, it doesn't sound like anything as bad as dealing with pedophiles, and that's the worst part. I don't know, like, it doesn't seem that bad to me. But there's more episodes coming out for Quiet on Set, because it was such a popular thing, so I'm definitely going to watch more of it. I'm excited. I did like it a lot. That is it. I managed to review all these in the span of 40 minutes. So if you stayed till the end, thank you guys so much. Tell me what you guys have been watching down below, and I'll see you later. Have a good one.